Queen Zalara of the Zenithian Empire stood at the massive viewport of her royal chamber, her iridescent skin catching the light of 3 distant suns. Her 6-fingered hand tapped impatiently against the crystalline railing as she observed the sprawling capital city below. The empire had expanded across 12 star systems under her 5-year reign, yet she found herself perpetually unsatisfied. "Human. Attend me," she commanded without turning around. Ethan Reed approached with measured steps, his face a practiced mask of subservience. He bowed precisely to the degree required by Zenithian protocol, low enough to show respect, but not so low as to suggest equality with her regular subjects. "Your Luminance," he responded, voice carefully modulated. Zalara finally turned, her violet eyes narrowing as they passed over his form. Humans were such fragile creatures, only 2 arms, dull skin that didn't shift with their emotions, and embarrassingly limited lifespans. This one had been a diplomatic gift from Earth's Unity government 3 years ago, a symbol of humanity's submission to Zenithian dominance in their sector. "The ambassadorial reception begins in 2 hours. I require a different adornment for my crest. This one," she gestured to the elaborate headpiece she wore, "doesn't properly convey my superiority to the Arcturian delegates." "Of course, Your Luminance. Perhaps the celestial crown would be appropriate?" It was specifically designed to subtly intimidate while maintaining diplomatic courtesy. Zalara snorted, a sound that resonated with harmonic undertones no human could produce. "You presume to advise me on diplomatic strategy? Know your place, human." "Forgiveness, Your Luminance." Ethan bowed again, retreating several steps. Yet Zalara noticed something in his eyes, a fleeting glimmer that vanished too quickly to identify. Not quite defiance, but something else. She dismissed it. Humans were transparent in their emotions, lacking the neural capacity for complex dissembling. "Bring the celestial crown," she said finally. "And inform Royal Chamberlain Thawes that I wish to review the security arrangements personally." "There have been no threats detected, Your Luminance," Ethan stated carefully. "Did I ask for your assessment?" Zalara's skin flashed crimson at his presumption. "The Peacekeeping Intelligence Network detected unusual communication patterns from the outer colonies. Nothing concrete, but I take no chances." "Very wise, Your Luminance." As Ethan left to retrieve the crown, Zalara returned to the viewport. Something about the human bothered her lately. He performed his duties with impeccable precision, anticipating her needs often before she expressed them. Yet she sometimes caught him watching her with an intensity that seemed inappropriate for a servant of his station. Perhaps she should have him replaced. The Unity government would surely provide another human specimen if requested. Yet there was something efficient about this one that would be inconvenient to lose. He had learned Zenithian customs with remarkable speed and rarely made the cultural blunders so common among his kind. When Ethan returned with the celestial crown, he approached with proper deference, presenting it with a bow. "Your Luminance, High Commander Vex requests an audience before the reception. He claims it concerns sensitive security matters." Zalara frowned. Vex was not one for unnecessary alarms. "Send him in." Moments later, the imposing figure of High Commander Vex strode into the chamber, his ceremonial armor gleaming. He cast a dismissive glance at Ethan before addressing his queen. "Your Luminance, our intelligence units have intercepted encrypted transmissions between known rebel sympathizers. Activity has increased tenfold in the past cycle." Zalara's crest flared with concern. "Do they pose a genuine threat?" "Uncertain, but the pattern suggests coordination. I recommend heightened security protocols for tonight's reception." Zalara nodded. "Implement them discreetly. I won't show weakness before the Arcturians." As Vex departed, Zalara noticed Ethan standing perfectly still by the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You are dismissed, human. Prepare my ceremonial chambers for later." Ethan bowed and left, but not before Zalara caught another strange look in his eyes, almost like calculation. She shook off the thought. What could a mere human servant possibly be calculating? His kind were useful for simple tasks but hardly possessed the intellectual capacity for complex strategic thinking. Later, as Zalara studied her reflection with the celestial crown in place, she felt a strange shiver of premonition. Something felt off balance in her perfectly ordered world. But what queen had time for superstitions? Tonight, she would demonstrate once again why the Zenithian Empire dominated this sector of the galaxy, and why species like humans were destined to serve rather than lead. She had no way of knowing how dramatically her perceptions would soon change. The ambassadorial reception was in full swing, with representatives from 12 star systems mingling beneath the floating light sculptures of the Grand Hall. Queen Zalara moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her celestial crown catching the light in hypnotic patterns designed to subtly assert her dominance over all who gazed upon it. Your treaty terms are most generous, Your Luminance, purred Ambassador Kreth of the Arcturian Collective, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Though we find the military presence along our shared borders concerning. Zalara's skin rippled with subtle patterns of authority. Merely precautionary, Ambassador. The outer colonies have grown restless, and I would hate for that restlessness to disturb our Arcturian friends. From his position against the wall, Ethan observed the exchange with a neutral expression. To anyone watching, he appeared to be just another human servant, valuable only for his ability to anticipate his mistress's needs. But his eyes catalogued every face in the room, every subtle shift in posture, every hand that drifted too close to concealed pockets. High Commander Vex approached Zalara with a bow. Your Luminance, all security protocols are in place. My guards have secured all entry points. Excellent, Commander. You may reduce visibility somewhat. I don't want our guests feeling unwelcome. Her voice carried the harmonics of absolute authority. As Vex withdrew, Ethan noticed something the Zenithian guards had missed, a server whose movements seemed too precise, too measured for someone merely distributing refreshments. The server's eyes kept darting to specific guards, mapping their positions. Ethan slipped through the crowd, positioning himself closer to Queen Zalara while accessing the hidden neural link embedded beneath his skin. His pupils dilated momentarily as information flooded his consciousness, surveillance data, security feeds, thermal signatures. The palace security systems were experiencing microsecond disruptions, barely noticeable, but telling. When the first explosion rocked the eastern wing of the palace, pandemonium erupted in the Grand Hall. Zenithian guards moved to surround their queen as guests scrambled for exits. Secure her Luminance. Vex shouted, drawing his ceremonial blade which hummed with energy. 3 more explosions followed in quick succession, and the hall's lights flickered. Ethan moved with sudden purpose, no longer the deferential servant but something else entirely. Your Luminance, we need to move, he said, his voice now carrying a commanding edge that made Zalara's crest flare with indignation. How dare you, she began, but her words died as the server Ethan had been watching pulled a weapon from beneath his tray and fired at one of her guards. The hall erupted in chaos. Rebel infiltrators revealed themselves among the guests and servers, targeting the royal guards with precision. High Commander Vex pushed Zalara toward a concealed exit, but 3 attackers intercepted them. Death to the tyrant, one shouted, raising a disruptor pistol. Before Vex could react, Ethan moved with blinding speed. His body flowed like liquid, dodging the first energy blast while simultaneously disarming the attacker with a strike to the wrist. He spun, using the rebel's momentum to throw him into his comrades. Zalara stared in shock as her supposedly weak human servant dispatched 3 armed Zenithian rebels with moves she had never seen before, efficient, lethal, and executed with cold precision. This way, Ethan ordered, grabbing her arm, a touch that would normally warrant execution. The main exits are compromised. Too stunned to object, Zalara allowed herself to be led toward a service corridor as Vex engaged more attackers behind them. "Commander," she called out. "Go, Your Luminance. I will find you when it's secure." Vex shouted back before disappearing into the melee. Ethan guided her through passages she hadn't known existed in her own palace, moving with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the layout. When two rebels appeared before them, Ethan didn't hesitate. He shoved Zalara behind him and engaged them with a combat style that seemed to blend multiple martial disciplines. The fight lasted seconds. When it was over, both rebels lay unconscious, and Ethan stood unharmed, barely breathing hard. "What are you?" Zalara demanded, her voice losing its harmonic confidence for the first time in years. "Later," he responded tersely. "We need to reach the secure bunker beneath the eastern gardens." "I give the orders here, human," she hissed, but her protest lacked conviction. Ethan fixed her with a gaze that no servant should dare direct at the Queen of the Zenithian Empire. "With respect, Your Luminance, this is a coordinated assassination attempt. Your royal guards are being systematically eliminated, and this attack has been planned for months. Right now, your choices are to follow me or die. I recommend the former." The distant sound of weapons fire and another explosion punctuated his statement. Zalara's skin darkened with anger and confusion, but survival instinct overrode her pride. "Let on," she conceded. They moved through the lower levels of the palace, avoiding the main corridors where the sounds of fighting echoed. Twice more they encountered rebels, and twice more Zalara watched in astonishment as Ethan neutralized them with ruthless efficiency. "How did you conceal these abilities?" she asked as they paused at an intersection. Ethan checked around the corner before responding. "You saw what you expected to see, Your Luminance. Humans are weak, servile creatures, beneath notice or concern. It made my job easier." "Your job?" Her crest flared with sudden suspicion. "Are you part of this? If I were, you'd already be dead." His bluntness shocked her. "I'm here to keep you alive, though right now you're making that challenging with questions. We need to move." They reached a concealed door that Zalara had never noticed despite passing this corridor countless times. Ethan placed his palm against an unmarked section of wall, and to her astonishment, a scanner activated, reading his biometrics. "That's Zenithian military technology," she whispered. "How do you have clearance?" The door slid open to reveal an emergency bunker equipped with communications technology and survival supplies. "Because," Ethan said as he sealed the door behind them, straightening to his full height and finally dropping the subservient posture he'd maintained for 3 years, "I was never really your servant." Zalara backed away, her hand instinctively reaching for the ceremonial dagger at her waist. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Captain Ethan Reed, Earth Special Forces, Black Operations Division." He gave her a tight smile that held no warmth. "And right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and the rebels who want your head on a pike." The Queen of the Zenithian Empire stared at him, her worldview crumbling around her. The weak, insignificant human she had dismissed and degraded for years was suddenly the most dangerous person in her palace, and apparently, her only hope for survival. Queen Zalara's violet eyes narrowed to dangerous slits, her skin cycling through patterns of disbelief, outrage, and calculation. The ceremonial dagger remained in her grip, though she knew using it against Ethan, Captain Reed, apparently, would be futile given what she just witnessed. "Explain yourself," she demanded, struggling to maintain her regal composure. "Why would Earth send a special operative to infiltrate my court? We have a peace treaty." Ethan moved to the bunker's control panel, activating security measures and surveillance monitors that showed the chaos still unfolding throughout the palace. His movements were economical, nothing like the deferential gestures he'd performed for years. "The treaty exists because my government saw potential in yours," he said without looking at her. "But we're not fools, Your Luminance. Earth has dealt with enough expansionist empires to know that protection is prudent. Protection, she scoffed. You mean espionage. Call it what you want. My mission was to observe, report, and, should circumstances require it, extract you in the event of a coup. He gestured to the monitors. Like the one currently in progress. On the screens, Zalara watched rebel forces overrunning her palace. Many of her royal guards fought bravely, but some had turned traitor, firing on their former comrades. High Commander Vex was nowhere to be seen. This is impossible, she whispered. Our intelligence networks would have detected. Your intelligence networks were compromised months ago, Ethan interrupted. And your dismissal of human capabilities meant you never noticed when I tried to warn you through suggestions and observations. The truth of his words stung. How many times had he made casual comments about security vulnerabilities or suspicious activities that she had brushed aside as presumptuous? Why protect me at all, she demanded. Earth would benefit from my fall. Ethan finally turned to face her fully. Destabilization of the Zenithian Empire would create a power vacuum that could trigger interstellar war. Earth prefers the devil it knows, even an arrogant one, to the chaos that would follow your assassination. He approached a cabinet and pressed his palm against it. The door slid open to reveal combat gear and weapons that were definitely not Zenithian in design. Earth technology, she breathed. Hidden in my own palace. Emergency caches throughout the capital, he confirmed, removing a sleek black bodysuit. You'll need to change. He tossed her a similar suit designed to accommodate Zenithian physiology. I will not wear human attire, she protested. It's bulletproof, energy dispersive, and contains tech that will mask your biosignature, he replied flatly. Wear it or die in royal finery. Your choice, your luminance. The way he said her title now carried a subtle mockery that made her skin darken with anger. But survival instinct prevailed again. She snatched the suit and moved behind a partition to change. How long, she called out. How long have humans been placing operatives in alien governments? Since the Centauri conflict, about 30 Earth years ago, he answered. After 3 colony worlds were destroyed, Earth's leadership decided trust but verify was the only viable diplomatic strategy. Zalara emerged in the black bodysuit, feeling strangely vulnerable without her ceremonial garments and crown. And you've been here for 3 years, she said. Watching. Reporting my every move to your human masters. Not everything, he replied, checking the charge on an energy pistol before holstering it. Some things weren't relevant to Earth's interests. Something in his tone made her pause. What things? Instead of answering, he handed her a weapon. Do you know how to use this? Of course not. Zenithian royalty doesn't engage in combat. That's what subjects are for. That attitude is partly why you're in this situation, he sighed. Quick lesson, point, press here to fire, here to adjust intensity. Don't shoot me. A distant explosion rocked the bunker, dust sifting from the ceiling. They're using thermal charges to search for hidden chambers, Ethan said. We need to move. There's a tunnel system beneath the palace that connects to the spaceport. We can't leave. Zalara protested. This is my empire, my world. It won't be for much longer unless we get you to safety and organize a counteroffensive. Ethan checked the monitors again. The rebel propaganda is already broadcasting throughout the system. They're claiming you've been assassinated. He activated a screen showing a Zenithian woman with elaborate military markings addressing the public. The tyrant Queen Zalara has fallen. The Zenithian people reclaim their destiny today. The military supports a return to the Council of Elders governance system. Vizier Nix, Zalara hissed, her skin flushing deep crimson. My own vizier betrays me. She's been planning this for at least a year, Ethan confirmed. Earth intelligence noticed funds being diverted to shadow accounts, military units being reassigned to remote outposts, all under your authorization codes. Impossible. I never. Your authentication systems were compromised. He opened a hidden passage behind a storage unit. We need to move. Now. As they entered the dark tunnel, Zalara's mind raced. Everything she had believed about her rule, her security, her empire was crumbling. And most disturbing of all, this human, this creature she had considered barely more intelligent than a service drone, had known it all along. Why didn't you tell me directly? She demanded as they hurried through the passage. Would you have believed me? He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable in the dim emergency lighting. Would the great Queen Zalara have accepted that a human had uncovered a plot her own intelligence services missed? His words struck home with painful accuracy. You could have tried, she said, more softly. I did. 3 times. You dismissed my human paranoia and threatened to have me replaced. The memory surfaced, Ethan raising concerns about Vizier Nix's unusual meeting patterns, about discrepancies in the military deployment logs. She had indeed dismissed him harshly. They emerged into a maintenance tunnel that hummed with the spaceport's massive power conduits. The sounds of battle were more distant here. There's a ship waiting, Ethan said. Earth Diplomatic Registry. They won't dare fire on it without risking war with Earth. I never understood, Zalara said suddenly, stopping in her tracks. Why Earth agreed so readily to our demands. Why they sent a diplomatic gift instead of fighting back when we claimed their outer colonies. Ethan turned to face her. Because sometimes appearing weak is the greatest strength. While your intelligence services were busy monitoring our official military, Earth was placing operatives like me throughout your empire and beyond. We've been preparing for something like this for years. Then Earth orchestrated this rebellion? Her hand tightened on her weapon. No. This is entirely homegrown Zenithian politics. But we weren't about to let your empire collapse into civil war that could spread to human space. He stepped closer. Whether you like it or not, your luminance, our species' futures are intertwined. And right now, I'm your best hope for reclaiming your throne. Zalara looked at him, really looked at him, for perhaps the first time. Not as a servant or an inferior species, but as an equal. The realization was both humbling and infuriating. Then lead on, Captain Reed, she said finally. It seems I have much to learn about humans, and about my own empire. As they continued toward the spaceport, Zalara's world had been irreversibly altered. The human she had underestimated for years was now her protector, her guide, and perhaps her only ally in a universe that had suddenly become far more complex than she had ever imagined. The Earth diplomatic vessel Horizon slipped into hyperspace with barely a ripple, leaving the chaos of Zenithia Prime behind. In the ship's conference room, Queen Zalara paced like a caged predator, her iridescent skin shifting between patterns of rage and frustration. Through the viewport, she watched her homeworld shrink to a mere point of light before disappearing entirely. 3 generations of Zenithian rule, she hissed. My grandmother united the warring houses. My mother expanded our reach to 7 systems. And I am the one who loses it all. Ethan entered the room carrying data tablets. He had changed from the combat gear into a crisp Earth military uniform adorned with subtle insignia that Zalara now recognized as denoting substantial rank. You haven't lost anything yet, he said, laying the tablets on the conference table. But reclaiming your throne will require a significant adjustment to your worldview. My worldview? She bristled. You think this is about philosophy, Captain Reed? I think, he replied evenly, that your dismissal of other species, particularly humans, as inferior is what allowed this coup to succeed. While you were focused on maintaining your image of superiority, Vizier Nix was building a coalition against you. How dare you? Spare me the royal indignation, Ethan cut her off, something no one had done in years. You've spent 3 years treating me like an intelligent pet. I've earned the right to speak plainly. They stared at each other across the table, tension crackling between them. Finally, Zalara broke the gaze and sank into a chair. Proceed, she said stiffly. Ethan activated the tablets, projecting holograms of various Zenithian military and political figures. We've identified key players in the rebellion. Vizier Nix is the public face, but the real power lies with General Krav of your outer colony's defense force. He gestured to an austere Zenithian male with battle scarring across his crest. He commands the loyalty of about 60% of your military. Krav was my father's most trusted commander, Zalara murmured. I never suspected. He disagreed with your aggressive expansion policies. He believed Zenithia should consolidate power rather than continue conquering. Ethan highlighted several star systems. These colonies have declared for the rebellion already. These, he indicated several more, are wavering, waiting to see who emerges victorious. Zalara studied the map with growing dismay. Half my empire gone in a day. Not gone, Ethan corrected. Just temporarily out of your control. We have allies. We? She questioned, arching an eyebrow. Earth has a vested interest in your restoration. A fragmented Zenithian empire benefits no one. He pulled up another projection showing Earth military assets positioned near Zenithian space. These battle groups can be loaned to your cause, unofficially. I don't understand, Zalara said. Why would Earth help restore a ruler who has been hostile to human interests? Ethan's expression softened slightly. Because we believe you can change. My reports over the years weren't all negative, your luminance. You're arrogant and prejudiced, yes, but you're also brilliant, adaptable, and capable of growth. Something strange fluttered in Zalara's chest at his words. Not just the shock of hearing herself described so bluntly, but the realization that this human had been studying her with far more nuance than she had ever bothered to apply to him. And if I refuse to change, she challenged. Then Earth will back another candidate for the throne. Someone more amenable to cooperation. His tone was matter-of-fact. But that's not my recommendation. Before she could respond, the ship's captain appeared on the communication screen. Captain Reed, we've received a transmission from High Commander Vex. He's alive and has secured a loyalist stronghold in the Tarvis system. Zalara's crest flared with the first hope she'd felt since the attack. Vex lives. Put him through immediately. The screen shifted to show the battle-worn face of her High Commander. His ceremonial armor was gone, replaced by functional combat gear. A wound across his face was still healing. Your luminance, he bowed his head. I feared you had been lost. It would take more than traitors to end my reign, she replied, falling easily back into her royal persona. What forces remain loyal? The Royal Guard is with you to the last warrior. 3 fleet battle groups refused Krav's orders and have joined me at Tarva Station. Provincial governors in the inner systems are declaring for you, but they need protection from rebel forces. We will provide it, Zalara stated. She glanced at Ethan. It seems we have the beginnings of a counteroffensive, Captain Reed. We should rendezvous with Commander Vex, Ethan agreed. But first, we need to discuss terms. Terms? Zalara's skin darkened. I am still queen. Of a fracturing empire, Ethan reminded her. Earth won't commit resources without guarantees. After Vex's transmission ended, the argument between Zalara and Ethan lasted hours. She raged, threatened, and finally, reluctantly negotiated. By the time they reached agreement, they had also reached the Tarva system. Tarva Station hung in orbit around a gas giant, its massive structure housing both military and civilian sections. As the horizon docked, Zalara prepared to meet her loyal forces. She had discarded the human combat suit in favor of a Zenithian military uniform provided by the station. "Not your usual royal regalia," Ethan observed as they prepared to disembark. "A queen who hides behind ceremony while asking her people to fight is no queen at all," she replied. The words surprised even her, they reflected a perspective she wouldn't have considered days earlier. High Commander Vex greeted them with a formal honor guard. The Zenithian warriors saluted their queen with fierce loyalty, many bearing fresh battle wounds. "Your Luminance, we await your command," Vex said, leading them to the station's strategic command center. The following days were a blur of planning, negotiations, and preparation. Ethan worked tirelessly alongside Zalara, his knowledge of both Earth and Zenithian military tactics proving invaluable. Earth's unofficial support materialized in the form of advanced weapons, shield technology, and intelligence data. Late one night, as they reviewed battle plans alone in the command center, Zalara found herself studying Ethan's profile as he worked. The concentration in his eyes, the confident set of his shoulders, how had she never seen the warrior beneath the servant's pose? "You're staring, your Luminance," he said without looking up. "I'm reassessing," she corrected. 3 years, and I never truly saw you. You saw what you expected to see. And now?" she asked softly. He turned to face her fully. "Now you're beginning to see what's actually there. For all of us." The intensity in his gaze stirred something unfamiliar within her. She moved closer, her skin shifting to patterns that no Zenithian would mistake. "Is this why you protected me so diligently, Captain? Personal interest beyond your mission parameters?" Ethan's expression remained carefully controlled, but Zalara's enhanced senses detected the slight increase in his heart rate. "My mission was to protect Zenithian stability," he said evenly. "And yet you seem particularly invested in my survival." She was close enough now to feel the heat from his body. "You're the legitimate ruler. The alternatives would be worse for everyone. Is that the only reason?" She reached out, her 6-fingered hand hovering near his face. The moment hung between them, charged with possibilities neither had acknowledged before. Then the command center door slid open as Vex entered with urgent news. "Your Luminance. General Krov's fleet has been detected moving toward the Zenithian homeworld. It appears they're planning a full military occupation to solidify their control." The spell broken, Ethan and Zalara stepped apart, returning to their roles as queen and advisor. But something had changed between them, a recognition of connection that transcended species and station. "Prepare our forces," Zalara commanded. "It's time to remind the Empire who their true queen is." As the station erupted into pre-battle activity, Zalara caught Ethan's gaze across the command center. For the first time, she saw him not as a human, not as a servant, not even as an ally, but as an equal. Perhaps more. The revelation was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. The battle for Zenithia Prime unfolded across the star system like a deadly dance. Queen Zalara's loyalist fleet, bolstered by borrowed Earth technology, engaged General Krov's rebel forces in the outer orbital paths. From the command deck of the Zenithian battlecruiser Sovereign Light, Zalara watched tactical displays with unwavering focus, her military uniform now bearing the scars of previous skirmishes. "Krov's flagship is maintaining distance," noted High Commander Vex. "He's letting his subordinates take the brunt of our attack." "As expected," Ethan said, studying the three-dimensional battle projection. "He's waiting to see if our shield modifications hold against their primary weapons." Zalara nodded. "Then let's show him. Order Battle Group Series to execute flanking pattern Delta. Target their support vessels first." The Queen's tactical acumen had surprised even her most loyal commanders. Gone was the ruler who remained aloof from military matters. In her place stood a commander who had absorbed decades of strategic knowledge in mere days, thanks in no small part to Ethan's guidance. As her orders translated into action, Zalara felt Ethan's presence beside her, steady, assured, no longer hidden behind a servant's mask. Their shoulders nearly touched as they leaned over the tactical display, and neither moved away. "Your Earth technology is impressive," she acknowledged quietly. "But it's your strategies that may win this day. Humanity had to become clever to survive against technologically superior species," he replied. "When you can't outgun your opponent, you outthink them." An alert sounded as enemy vessels broke formation, attempting to surround a section of Loyalist ships. "They're adapting," Zalara observed. "So must we," Ethan countered. "Permission to take direct control of our special operations teams?" "Granted, Captain." The formal address felt strange now, almost intimate in its distance from how she had come to think of him. As Ethan coordinated the specialized strike teams, a mix of Zenithian commandos and Earth operatives who had revealed themselves from various positions throughout the Empire, Zalara received a priority communication. "Your Luminance," the communications officer called. "We're receiving a direct transmission from General Krav. For your eyes only." Zalara exchanged a glance with Ethan before nodding. "I'll take it in the private chamber." "I should accompany you," Ethan said quietly. "No. This is between Zenithians." Her tone brooked no argument, though the concern in his eyes nearly made her reconsider. In the adjacent tactical room, the holographic image of General Krav materialized, proud, stern, his military decorations prominently displayed. "General," Zalara acknowledged, offering no bow or title. "Queen Zalara," he returned with equal coolness. "I see you survived our palace cleansing. Did you expect otherwise?" "I expected you to flee to some pleasure world beyond our borders," Krav admitted. "Your return with military precision suggests you found new advisors." "I've found many things, General. Including the truth about my empire." Krav's expression hardened. "The empire was built by warriors, not politicians who surrender our territories for diplomatic niceties. Your father understood this. You forgot it." "My father expanded wisely. I pushed too far, too fast," Zalara admitted, the words no longer burning her pride as they once would have. "But rebellion is not the answer. Isn't it? Look at you now, fighting alongside humans, adopting their tactics." "The court would be scandalized." "The court was blind," Zalara countered. "As was I. The humans aren't inferior, Krav. Different, yes. But in some ways, more advanced than we are." The general's crest flared with disgust. "You've been corrupted by your human pet. We monitored him, you know. Always so close to the Queen." Something protective flared within Zalara. "Captain Reed is not my pet. He never was, though I mistakenly treated him as such." "Captain, is it?" Krav's expression shifted to calculating interest. "So Earth did infiltrate our government. Your human isn't just a servant, he's their agent." "He's my ally," Zalara declared firmly. "As you once were. It doesn't have to end in bloodshed, Krav. I'm offering terms." "Terms?" The general laughed harshly. "The Queen of Zenithia does not offer terms. She conquers or she dies." "That thinking belongs to the past," Zalara said. "I've changed. The Empire must change with me." Their conversation was interrupted by a violent shudder that rocked the ship. Alarms blared as Ethan burst into the room. "They're launching a direct assault on the Sovereign Light," he reported. "We need to move you to a more secure vessel." Krav's hologram flickered as he smiled coldly. "It seems our discussion must end, Your Luminance. When next we meet, it will be on the execution platform." As his image vanished, another explosion rocked the ship. Ethan grabbed Zalara's arm, pulling her toward the exit. "The command deck's been breached," he shouted over the alarms. "Boarding parties." They raced through corridors filled with smoke and the sounds of combat. Ethan's weapon was drawn, his movements fluid and precise as they encountered resistance. Zalara fought alongside him, no longer the distant royal but a warrior queen defending her right to rule. They reached the emergency shuttle bay to find High Commander Vex holding off rebel forces with a handful of royal guards. "Your Luminance," he called. "The shuttle is prepared." As they fought their way toward the shuttle, a rebel energy blast caught Vex in the shoulder, spinning him around. Zalara moved without thinking, dragging the injured commander behind cover while Ethan provided covering fire. "We need to split their attention," Ethan called. "I'll draw their fire while you get Vex to the shuttle." "No," Zalara countered. "Too risky." "Trust me," he insisted, their eyes meeting in a moment of perfect understanding. She nodded once. "Don't you dare die, Captain. That's a royal command." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before he launched himself into the fray, drawing the rebels' attention with precision strikes that seemed impossible for a single fighter. Zalara helped Vex to the shuttle, her mind divided between escape and concern for Ethan. As the shuttle's engines powered up, she looked back to see him fighting his way toward them, rebels closing in from all sides. "Wait," she ordered the pilot. "We can't, Your Luminance," Vex protested. "If you're captured." "I said wait." Her command voice brooked no argument. The seconds stretched like hours until Ethan finally dove through the shuttle door, rolling to his feet as it sealed behind him. Blood streaked his face from a cut above his eye, but his expression was triumphant. "The ship is lost," he reported as the shuttle launched. "But I activated the self-destruct sequence on the classified Earth tech. They won't get their hands on it." As they escaped the dying battlecruiser, Zalara moved to treat his wound, her touch gentle despite her warrior's demeanor. "You risked too much," she admonished softly. "For my queen?" "Never." His response carried layers of meaning that made her skin shimmer with patterns she couldn't control. Their moment was interrupted by an urgent call from the pilot. "Your Luminance. General Krov's flagship is pursuing, but there's something else. Earth vessels are decloaking throughout the system." The tactical display showed dozens of advanced Earth warships appearing as if from nowhere, their weapon systems already targeted on rebel positions. "You knew," Zalara said, turning to Ethan. "Contingency plan," he admitted. "Authorized only if your life was directly threatened." The Earth Fleet's commander appeared on their communication screen, a stern-faced woman with admiral's insignia. "Queen Zalara of Zenithia, this is Admiral Hernandez of the Earth Defense Fleet. By authority of the Earth Unity Government, we are intervening in this civil conflict to restore the legitimate sovereign." The tide of battle shifted dramatically over the next hours. Caught between loyalist forces and the unexpected Earth fleet, General Krov's rebellion began to falter. When his flagship was surrounded, the general himself requested terms. The formal surrender took place on Zenithia Prime, in the same grand hall where the rebellion had begun. Krov knelt before Zalara, his proud crest now lowered in defeat. "The penalty for treason is death," she reminded him, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall where loyalists and former rebels alike gathered. "I am prepared to meet my end, Your Luminance," Krov replied stoically. Zalara studied him for a long moment, aware of Ethan standing at her right hand, no longer behind her as a servant, but beside her as an equal. "Death would be traditional," she acknowledged. "But traditions can change when they no longer serve us." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. "Your punishment is to serve," she declared. "The outer colonies you claim to fight for need a governor who understands their needs. You will rebuild what your rebellion destroyed, under Commander Vex's supervision." Krov looked up in shock. "Mercy, Your Luminance." "Not mercy," she corrected. "Evolution. The Empire must adapt to survive." She gestured around the hall. "Stand, General. There has been enough kneeling." The formal proceedings continued, with Earth representatives signing new treaties that acknowledged Zenithian sovereignty while establishing more equitable relations between their species. Throughout it all, Ethan remained at Zalara's side, their shared glances speaking volumes about the journey that had brought them to this point. That night, in the private royal chambers that had been restored after the rebellion's damage, Zalara found Ethan on her balcony, gazing up at the stars. "Admiral Hernandez informs me that you've been offered a promotion," she said, joining him at the railing. "Diplomatic liaison to the Zenithian court. A more honest position than royal servant," he acknowledged with a small smile. "And one that would keep you here," she added, her skin shifting to patterns of anticipation and desire that she no longer attempted to hide. Ethan turned to face her fully. "Is that what you want, Your Luminance?" "What I want," she said, moving closer until barely a breath separated them, "is for you to call me Zalara when we're alone." His hands reached for her waist, hesitating just short of contact. "Are you certain? The court might not approve of their queen taking a human as her consort." "The court will adapt," she murmured, closing the distance between them. "As I have." Their first kiss bridged worlds, different biologies, different cultures, different stars of origin. His hands explored the shifting patterns of her skin as hers traced the solid strength of his shoulders. When they finally moved to her bed chamber, it was as equals discovering each other anew. Later, as Ethan slept beside her, Zalara reflected on how completely her universe had transformed. She had lost the arrogance that blinded her, but gained a partnership that made her stronger. The human she had once dismissed as insignificant had become essential to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She traced her 6 fingers gently across his sleeping face, marveling at how different they were, yet how perfectly they fit together. The Queen of the Zenithian Empire had always believed strength came from dominance and control. Now she knew better. True strength came from connection, from vulnerability, from seeing clearly what was before her instead of what she expected to see. As dawn broke over Zenithia Prime, Zalara watched the first light touch the face of the man who had shattered her world, and helped her build a better one from the pieces. This, she realized, was her empire's true evolution. And her own.